Subscribe to Storylab. Now, let's begin this one. I watched the morning sun spill across the Montana rangeland, coffee steam rising in the cold air. 23 years as a Navy SEAL sniper had taught me patience, precision, and how to read the invisible currents that preceded violence. Now, at 47, I ran a modest horse ranch 50 miles outside Billings, training rescue animals and teaching troubled kids basic horsemanship. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man who'd spent 2 decades delivering death from 1,000 yards now spent his days nursing broken creatures back to trust. My son Cameron sat across from me at the breakfast table, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate. 15 years old, lean and quiet like his mother had been. Sarah died 4 years ago. Cancer, swift and merciless in a way enemy combatants never were. Since then, it had been just Cameron and me figuring out how to be a family in the wreckage. Wrestling practice after school? I asked. He nodded without looking up. Cameron had joined the team 3 months ago at Clearwater High, hoping to build confidence after years of being the quiet kid. He had my height, but not yet the weight to fill out his frame. The other boys were bigger, louder, more assured in the way teenagers could be when the world hadn't yet shown them its teeth. Coach Schultz seems like he's pushing you hard, I said. Cameron's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'd been reading body language since before he was born, micro-expressions that revealed more than words. He's fine, my son said, but his shoulders had gone rigid. I let it drop. Pushing Cameron when he wasn't ready only drove him deeper into himself. Instead, I changed subjects, talked about the new mare we'd rescued last week, how she was finally eating from my hand. Small victories. After Cameron left for school, I worked with the horses. 3 rescues this month alone. Animals people had given up on, starved or beaten or left to rot in muddy paddocks. The work was meditative, required the same focus as lining up a shot 2,000 meters out, except here I was putting things back together instead of taking them apart. My phone rang around noon. Dwight Mansfield, my closest friend since retiring from the service. He'd been my spotter for 8 years, the man who'd watch my back through Fallujah, Kandahar, and a dozen places that didn't exist on any official record. Vince, you near TV? His voice carried an edge. Just the horses. What's up? News is reporting a shooting at the federal building downtown. FBI agents involved. They're saying it might be connected to some classified operation from our days. My blood cooled. Anyone we know? Not yet, but they're asking questions. I want to make sure your paperwork is clean. After we hung up, I stood in the barn feeling the weight of my past pressing against the present. I'd left that world behind, buried it deep along with the names and faces of men I'd eliminated through rifle scopes. The government had promised anonymity, new identities if needed, but promises were just words. Cameron came home at 4:30, an hour later than usual. I was in the barn when I heard his truck pull up, the old Ford I'd taught him to drive on these dirt roads. He didn't come find me like he normally did. I gave him space, finished with the horses, washed up at the outdoor sink. When I entered the house, Cameron sat at the kitchen table, hunched over like he'd taken a body blow. His knuckles were split, dried blood crusted along the edges. What happened? I kept my voice level, approaching slowly. Nothing. Just practice got rough. I sat down across from him. Cameron. He looked up, and I saw it then. The bruising along his jaw, the way he held his ribs. His left eye was swelling, the skin around it darkening to purple. But worse than the physical damage was the look in his eyes. Shame. Fear. The expression of someone who'd been made to feel small. Son, tell me what happened. The story came out in fragments. Coach Herman Schultz had been riding him for weeks, singling him out during practice, making him run extra drills while others rested. Today, Cameron had questioned a technique that seemed wrong, and Schultz had told him to shut up and wrestle. When Cameron hesitated, the coach had grabbed him, slammed him down on the mat hard enough to knock the wind out, then made him keep going. When Cameron finally stood up to say he was hurt, Schultz had punched him. Full force, closed fist, in front of the entire team. Then he told everyone I was weak, that I'd never be tough enough, that I should quit before I embarrass myself further. Cameron's voice cracked. No one helped, Dad. They just watched. I felt something ancient and cold slide into place behind my eyes. The thing I'd learned to control in the service, the part of me that could pull a trigger and end a life without hesitation. I pushed it down, focused on my son. Did anyone at the school do anything? I went to the principal, Mr. Dolan. He said Coach Schultz was just being tough, that wrestling builds character through adversity. When I showed him my face, he said I probably deserved it for being disrespectful. Where's your injury report? The nurse's documentation? Cameron shook his head. Nurse wasn't there. Mr. Dolan said to ice it at home and that if I made a big deal about it, I'd be off the team. He said Coach Schultz is the police chief's brother, and that. He paused, seemed to struggle with the words. He said people like us don't win against people like them. I sat very still. People like us? He said you're just some burnout living on a ranch, that you couldn't do anything even if you wanted to. Cameron met my eyes. Is that true, Dad? Are we just nothing? I reached across the table, put my hand on his shoulder. Listen to me very carefully. You are not nothing. What happened to you is assault, plain and simple. And no one, no coach, no principal, no badge, gets to put their hands on my son and walk away. But Dad, I know who he is. Doesn't matter. I stood up. Get cleaned up. We're going to the hospital to document your injuries. Then we're going to have a conversation with some people. The Clearwater County Hospital emergency room smelled like antiseptic and desperation. I sat with Cameron while a doctor examined him. 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising across his back and shoulders, a minor concussion. The doctor, a woman in her 40s named Andrea Kane, looked at me with knowing eyes. These injuries are consistent with repeated trauma, she said quietly, writing notes. Not a single incident. It happened during wrestling practice, I said. Dr. Kane glanced at Cameron, then back to me. Mr. Lynn, I'm required to report suspected abuse to authorities. But I should tell you that the last 2 times I reported injuries from Clearwater High Athletics, my reports disappeared. The sheriff's department said they'd investigate and then nothing. Let me guess, I said. Coach Schultz. She didn't confirm it with words, but her expression said enough. I'll file the report anyway. It's all I can do. We left the hospital with documentation and prescriptions. On the drive home, Cameron stared out the window at the darkening landscape. Dad, maybe we should just drop it. I can quit the team, avoid him. It's not worth. It's worth everything, I said. You did nothing wrong. He assaulted you. And if we let him get away with it, what message does that send? That the world isn't fair? No, that we're afraid. And Lin men don't run from bullies. At home, I got Cameron settled with ice and painkillers. Once he'd fallen asleep on the couch, I went to my office, a converted tack room in the barn. I opened my computer and started searching. Police Chief Ralph Schultz, 52 years old, served in the military but never deployed overseas. He'd been with Clearwater County Sheriff's Department for 30 years, chief for the last 10. His brother Herman, 48, taught physical education and coached 3 sports at Clearwater High. The Schultz family had deep roots in the area, going back 4 generations. Ralph's wife, Roxanne, ran the local real estate office. Herman was married to Jane Schultz, who worked as the county clerk. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. The Schultz family had their fingers in everything: law enforcement, education, real estate, local government. They weren't just connected. They were the infrastructure of power in Clearwater County. And according to various local news articles and buried complaints, they had a history of abusing that power. Sexual harassment allegations against Herman that went nowhere. Excessive force complaints against Ralph that disappeared. Property disputes where the Schultzes always seemed to win. I opened a secure, encrypted email account I hadn't used in 3 years. Sent a message to an old contact in Naval Intelligence. Just a name and a request for background. Within 2 hours, I had my answer. Ralph Schultz had tried to join the SEALs. He'd washed out during Hell Week, quit on day 2. But he'd spent the rest of his career telling people he'd been special forces, wearing tactical gear, collecting military memorabilia. A wannabe who'd never earned the title, but demanded the respect. That explained a lot. Men like that, who'd quit when things got hard, often overcompensated by dominating those weaker than them. They craved the authority they'd never legitimately earned. I spent the rest of the night building a profile. not just of Ralph and Herman, but of their entire network. By dawn, I had a map of corruption that ran through the county like rot through timber. The principal, Gerardo Dolan, was Ralph's wife's cousin. The county prosecutor had gone to high school with Herman. The mayor's daughter was dating Ralph's son. It was a closed system designed to protect its own and crush anyone who challenged it. But closed systems had weaknesses, pressure points, and I'd spent 23 years learning how to find them. The next morning, I drove Cameron to school despite his protests. I can't face them, Dad. Everyone saw what happened. They'll think I'm weak. They saw a coach assault a student and get away with it. That's on him, not you. You're going to walk in there with your head up because you have nothing to be ashamed of. I pulled into the parking lot and walked him to the entrance. Other students stared. Some looked sympathetic, others smirked. The social hierarchy of high school, where strength was measured in brute force and compliance. Mr. Lin, a woman approached us, mid-30s, professional but warm. I'm Ms. Anderson, Cameron's English teacher. I just wanted to say, what happened yesterday was wrong. Some of us tried to speak up, but the administration shut you down. She nodded. I want you to know that not everyone here supports this. There are good people trying to change things. I gave her a slight nod. Thank you for saying that. After Cameron disappeared into the building, I drove to the school's administrative office, requested a meeting with Principal Dolan. The secretary, a nervous woman in her 60s, said he was busy. Tell him I'll wait. I sat in the lobby for an hour. Other parents came and went, dealing with permission slips and attendance issues. Finally, Gerardo Dolan emerged from his office. Late 50s, soft around the middle, with the entitled bearing of someone who'd never been challenged. Mr. Lin, I don't know what you think you're doing here, but my son was assaulted by a member of your staff. I'm here to discuss what you're going to do about it. Dolan glanced at the secretary, then gestured to his office. Inside, he sat behind a large desk covered with sports trophies. Look, I understand you're upset, but Coach Schultz is one of our most valuable staff members. He's won championships, built character in hundreds of young men. He beat my son unconscious. That's an exaggeration. Cameron was disrespectful during practice. Coach Schultz was maintaining discipline. He committed assault in front of witnesses. I have medical documentation. Dolan leaned back in his chair, and his expression shifted. The false concern evaporated, replaced by something colder. Mr. Lin, I'm going to be frank with you. Coach Schultz is Police Chief Ralph Schultz's brother. They're family, and family looks after each other in this town. So whatever you think you're going to do, whatever complaint you think you're going to file, it's not going anywhere. Is that a threat? It's reality. You're new here. You keep to yourself on that ranch. You don't have connections, influence, or frankly, any standing in this community. Herman Schultz has been here his whole life. Who do you think people are going to believe? He leaned forward. My advice, take your son out of wrestling. Let this blow over, and be grateful Herman didn't press charges for defamation. I stood up slowly. Let me make sure I understand. You're protecting a man who beats children because he's related to the police chief. I'm maintaining order in my school. Now, if you'll excuse me, one more question. Have you ever served in the military, Mr. Dolan? He blinked at the non sequitur. What? No. Why does that matter? Because you clearly don't understand what it means to have principles worth fighting for, or what happens when you underestimate your opponent. I turned toward the door, then paused. You should know, I'm not going away. My son deserves justice, and he's going to get it. Dolan's face reddened. Get out of my office, and if you set foot on school property again without an appointment, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. I smiled, not a friendly smile. The smile I'd worn in briefing rooms before operations, when targets were designated and rules of engagement were discussed. Have a good day, Mr. Dolan. Walking back to my truck, I felt the familiar cold clarity settling over me. I'd tried the legitimate channels, followed the rules, given them a chance to do the right thing. They'd chosen corruption over justice, power over principles. That was their mistake. I spent the afternoon at the ranch, working through possibilities. My phone rang around 4, a blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Vince Lin, a male voice, deep and authoritative. Who's asking? Police Chief Ralph Schultz. I heard you've been making waves about my brother. Wanted to clear the air before this gets out of hand. Your brother assaulted my son. That's already out of hand. Look, Herman's passionate about coaching. Sometimes it gets intense. But these kids, they need discipline. Your boy was being disrespectful, and Herman was teaching him a lesson. It's how wrestling works. Wrestling doesn't involve punching students in the face. That's not how Herman tells it. Says your son threw a punch first, that he was defending himself. And you know what? That's what's going to be in the official report if you push this. Cameron gets expelled for assault. Maybe catches a juvenile record. That what you want? I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. Ralph's voice hardened. I'm trying to do you a favor here. You're an outsider, Lynn. You don't know how things work in this county. My family has been here for generations. We keep the peace, maintain order, and we don't appreciate people who stir up trouble. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this nonsense, your son's going to stay quiet, and life goes on. Otherwise, well, I'd hate for you to have problems with your ranch permits, property taxes, building inspections. Small town, lots of regulations. Easy for things to go wrong. Is that all? That's my friendly warning. Next time, I might not be so nice. Have a good evening, Mr. Lynn. The line went dead. I sat in my office, phone in hand, thinking about the man I'd just spoken to. Ralph Schultz had done exactly what I'd expected. Threatened me, tried to intimidate me, revealed his hand. He thought he was dealing with some civilian rancher who'd fold under pressure. He had no idea who I really was. I opened my laptop and accessed a secure server I maintained for situations exactly like this. Inside was everything from my SEAL career that wasn't classified. Mission reports, skill sets, contacts. But more importantly, there were protocols, methods, the accumulated knowledge of how to conduct operations when official channels were unavailable. I pulled up a satellite image of Clearwater County, marked the Schultz family's addresses, work locations, regular routes. Began building a pattern of life analysis. Ralph lived in a large house on the north side of town. Herman rented a place near the school. They met regularly at a local bar called the Timber Lodge. Ralph's wife, Roxanne, spent her days at the real estate office. Herman's wife, Jane, worked at the courthouse. Then I started mapping their vulnerabilities. Financial records, public complaints, sealed court documents I could access through old intelligence channels. The Schultz family wasn't just corrupt, they were sloppy about it. Years of operating without consequences had made them arrogant, careless. Around midnight, Dwight called. You all right? Haven't heard from you since yesterday. I told him everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. Vince, these small-town corruption cases, they're messy. Takes years to build legal cases, and even then the system protects its own. I know, you're thinking about going off book. I'm thinking about protecting my son. There's a difference between protection and revenge. Is there? I asked. When the system is designed to shield abusers, when every legitimate avenue is blocked, what choice is left? The choice to be better than them, to not become what you're fighting against. I understood what Dwight was saying, but he hadn't seen Cameron's face yesterday, the shame and fear in his eyes. Hadn't heard the police chief's smug threats. I appreciate the concern, brother, but this is my call. At least tell me you'll be careful. These aren't enemy combatants in a war zone. They're American citizens, however corrupt. I'm always careful. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my office. The computer screens glow the only light. Dwight was right that there was a line between justice and vengeance. But watching Cameron suffer while his attacker walked free, protected by a corrupt system, that crossed a line too. The question wasn't whether I'd act. It was how far I was willing to go. And as I sat there, planning, I realized the answer. As far as necessary. Cameron woke screaming that night. I found him tangled in sheets, hyperventilating, reliving the assault. I sat with him until dawn, talking quietly, reminding him he was safe. But we both knew it was a lie. Herman Schultz was still out there, still teaching, still coaching. And now we'd become targets of the police chief's retaliation. In the morning light, watching my son finally sleep fitfully, I made my decision. The Schultz family wanted war. They just didn't know they'd already lost. The next 3 days, I watched and learned. Followed Ralph's patrol routes, Herman's schedule, mapped the entire family's movements. I identified every person in their network, every connection that gave them power. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. The Schultz family ran Clearwater County like a fiefdom. Ralph had deputies who were either family members or completely under his control. The county prosecutor was on their payroll, literally, I discovered, through hidden real estate deals. Even the state police seemed reluctant to investigate complaints against Ralph's department. But every system had pressure points. And the Schultz's greatest strength, their interconnected web of corruption, was also their greatest vulnerability. They were so confident in their immunity that they'd left trails everywhere. Financial irregularities, sealed complaints, witnesses who'd been silenced. I began reaching out carefully. Using encrypted communications, I contacted journalists who'd investigated police corruption in other counties, federal investigators who'd worked on civil rights violations, even some old military contacts who'd transitioned into civilian law enforcement reform. What I needed was leverage, and what I was learning was that Ralph Schultz had enemies. Plenty of them. People he'd wronged, threatened, or intimidated over the years. They were just too afraid to speak up. That was about to change. On Thursday afternoon, I had a visitor at the ranch. A woman in her early 30s, professional attire, carrying a briefcase. She introduced herself as Carrie Mahoney, an attorney from Billings. Mr. Lynn, I represent several families who've had incidents with the Schultz family over the years. I heard about what happened to your son. I'd like to help. We sat in my kitchen, and she laid out a disturbing pattern. 8 families in the past 5 years had filed complaints against either Ralph or Herman Schultz. Sexual harassment, excessive force, assault. Every case had been buried, dismissed, or settled with NDAs and payoffs. The system here is completely compromised, Carrie said. The county prosecutor won't touch them. The state police say it's a local matter. And any attorney who pushes too hard finds themselves dealing with mysterious audits, license challenges, even threats. So why are you here? Because I'm not local. And because I've been building a federal civil rights case for 2 years. I have FBI contacts who are interested. But I need witnesses willing to testify, documentation, evidence. What happened to Cameron could be the tipping point. She paused. But I have to warn you, this will take time. Months, maybe years. And the Schultzes will come after you hard the moment they realize what we're doing. I appreciated her honesty. But I also knew that legal processes moved slowly, and my son was suffering now. I'll cooperate fully, I said. But I need you to understand something. I'm not waiting for the system to maybe work in a few years. I'm going to protect my son by whatever means necessary. Carrie's expression hardened. Mr. Lynn, I can't be party to anything illegal. If you're planning some kind of vigilante action, I'm planning to ensure my son's safety. How I do that is my business. We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. All right, I didn't hear that. What I can tell you is that if anything were to happen that further exposed the Schultz family's corruption, it would significantly strengthen the federal case. Hypothetically speaking. After she left, I sat thinking about what she'd said. The FBI was interested. That meant federal resources, real consequences for the Schultzes. But it also meant waiting, hoping the system would work. I learned long ago not to rely on hope. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Just a photo. Cameron walking to his truck after school. The message was clear. We're watching your son. I called Cameron immediately. Where are you? Just got home. What? Stay in the house. Lock the doors. I'm on my way. I made it home in record time, checked every window and door. Cameron watched me with growing fear. Dad, what's going on? I showed him the text. His face went pale. They're going to hurt me again. No, I said firmly. They're not. Because tomorrow, you're staying home from school. And I'm going to have a conversation with Chief Schultz. Dad, he's the police. You can't. I can and I will. I've dealt with far more dangerous men than Ralph Schultz. He thinks he's intimidating because he wears a badge. He has no idea what real intimidation looks like. That night, I prepared, not with weapons or violence. Not yet, but with information. I compiled everything I'd learned about Ralph Schultz's corruption into a detailed file. Financial records showing kickbacks from local businesses. Complaints from women he'd harassed. Evidence of excessive force incidents he'd covered up. And most damaging, documentation of his brother Herman's history of violence that he'd systematically buried. I also made copies, sent them to secure servers, to trusted contacts, to dead drops I'd established during my SEAL years. If anything happened to me, these files would go public. Multiple newspapers, federal agencies, even international media. The Schultz's empire would collapse. At 7 a.m. Friday morning, I walked into the Clearwater County Sheriff's Department, told the desk sergeant I needed to speak with Chief Schultz immediately. She tried to put me off, but I simply sat in the lobby and waited. Ralph appeared 30 minutes later, flanked by 2 deputies. He looked smug, confident on his home turf. "Mr. Lynn, didn't expect to see you here. Got something to confess. Got something to discuss. In private." He led me to his office, the deputies staying outside. The room was decorated with commendations, photos of Ralph in tactical gear, military memorabilia. A shrine to the warrior he'd never been. "Make it quick," he said, sitting behind his desk. "I'm a busy man." I placed a manila folder on his desk. "This is everything I've compiled on your family's corruption over the past week. Financial crimes, civil rights violations, assault, harassment. It's comprehensive." Ralph opened the folder, flipped through a few pages. His expression barely changed, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Where did you get this? I have skills you're not aware of, and contacts you can't imagine. That folder is one copy. There are others in secure locations. If anything happens to me or my son, they go to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and the New York Times. You threatening me? I'm establishing terms. Here's what's going to happen. Your brother Herman is going to resign from the school. You're going to issue a public apology to my son, and you're both going to stay far away from us." Ralph laughed. "Or what? You'll release your little files? Go ahead. I've got friends everywhere. FBI, state level, you name it. This county is mine, Lynn. Has been for decades. You think some folder of allegations changes that? No. I think your brother's history of assaulting children changes that. I think the 13 women who've accused you of harassment change that. I think the money you've embezzled from county funds changes that." I leaned forward. "But mostly, I think you're about to learn the difference between a man who quit when things got hard and a man who spent 23 years doing the hardest job in the world." Ralph's face reddened. "Get out of my office. You've got nothing. And if you keep pushing this, I will destroy you. Your ranch, your reputation, your son's future. I will grind you into the dirt." I stood up. "You had a chance to do the right thing. You chose this." "Chose what?" I smiled. "War." Walking out of a sheriff's department, I felt the cold clarity I'd known in combat. The situation was clear. The enemy was defined. The mission parameters were set. Ralph Schultz thought he was protected by his badge, his connections, his family's power. He was about to learn that none of that mattered, because I'd been protecting sheep from wolves for 2 decades. And I knew exactly how to hunt predators. That night, I sat with Cameron and explained what was about to happen. Not the details, he didn't need to know that, but the broad strokes. "Son, things are going to get complicated. The Schultz family is going to push back hard against us. But I need you to trust me. Everything I do from here, I do to protect you and to make sure justice is served. Dad, I don't want you getting hurt because of me. You listen to me. What happened to you is evil. And evil flourishes when good people do nothing. I spent my entire adult life defending people who couldn't defend themselves. I'm not going to stop now just because the enemy wears a badge instead of a uniform. But they're powerful. Everyone's afraid of them. Power is an illusion, and fear is a choice." I put my hand on his shoulder. "I'm going to show you something important. That standing up for what's right matters more than being safe. That some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible." Cameron nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay home from school for now. If anyone tries to contact you, tell me immediately. And most importantly, remember that none of this is your fault. You're the victim here. Never forget that." Over the next few days, I worked in the shadows. Using skills I'd honed in places most people couldn't find on a map, I began systematically dismantling the Schultz family's power structure. First, I contacted witnesses. The 13 women who'd accused Ralph of harassment. The families who'd been intimidated into silence. Using encrypted communications and guarantees of anonymity, I convinced 3 of them to speak with Carrie Mahoney the attorney. Their testimony would be devastating in a federal case. Second, I leveraged my military connections. A former SEAL brother who'd become an FBI agent started making quiet inquiries into Ralph's department. Nothing official yet, just preliminary questions that would make Ralph nervous. Third, I hit them financially. Using some creative banking knowledge I'd acquired over the years, I flagged several of Ralph's suspicious transactions for IRS review. Anonymous tips about cash businesses, unreported income, mysterious real estate deals. I didn't break any laws. I simply ensured that the Schultz's existing crimes got the attention they deserved. By Wednesday, I could see the pressure building. Ralph stopped his usual patrol routes, spent more time in his office. Herman called in sick to school for 2 days straight. Their lawyer, a sleazy character named Brent Castro, who'd made his career defending corrupt officials, started making noise about harassment and defamation. But the real turning point came Thursday evening. I was feeding the horses when my phone rang. Carrie Mahoney. Vince, you need to be careful. The FBI just opened a formal investigation into Chief Schultz, which means he knows the walls are closing in. Men like that, when they're cornered, they get dangerous. I'm aware. I'm serious. He has access to weapons, trained deputies, and nothing left to lose. Please tell me you're taking precautions. Always. That night, I activated the ranch's security system, something I'd installed but rarely used. Motion sensors on all approaches, cameras covering every angle. I also reached out to Dwight, told him I might need backup. You really think he'll come after you? I think he's a coward who spent his life abusing his authority. Now that authority is crumbling. Yeah, he'll come. Question is when and how. Friday morning, I got my answer. I was in a barn when I heard vehicles approaching. Multiple engines, moving fast. I grabbed the radio and called to Cameron in the house. Lock the doors. Basement. Now. I walked out to meet them. 3 trucks pulled into my property. Ralph's police SUV in the lead, followed by 2 personal vehicles. Men piled out. I counted 6, including Ralph and Herman. All armed. Some wore tactical vests, others just jeans and jackets. But every one of them carried a weapon openly. This was meant to intimidate. A show of force. The Schultz family bringing overwhelming numbers to teach me a lesson. They had no idea they'd just walked into a kill box. Ralph stepped forward, hand resting on his holstered pistol. Vince Lynn, you've been a real problem for me. Spreading lies, harassing my family, interfering with police business. I'm placing you under arrest for threatening a law enforcement officer and stalking. You have an arrest warrant? Don't need one. Exigent circumstances. I have reasonable suspicion you're a danger to the community. I looked at the assembled men. Herman Schultz, the coward who beat children. 3 deputies who I recognized from my surveillance. All family members or cronies. And 2 civilians, probably relatives I hadn't identified yet. You're not here to arrest me, I said calmly. You're here to threaten me. Maybe rough me up. Send a message. That's what bullies do when they're losing control. Herman stepped forward. You think you're tough, old man? You're nothing. Just some washed-up soldier playing cowboy on a shit ranch. My brother should have run you out of town the first day. Funny, I said. I was thinking the same thing about you. Man who beats children calls someone else washed up. The irony. Herman's face reddened. He started toward me, but Ralph caught his arm. Easy. We do this smart. Smart would have been accepting my terms, I said. Walking away while you still could. But pride's a hell of a thing, isn't it? Can't stand the idea that someone challenged your authority. Someone who doesn't fear you. You should fear us, Ralph said. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and way out of your depth. This county is mine. Always has been. And I'm about to remind you what happens to people who forget their place. I smiled. See, that's where you made your mistake. You think this is your territory, your rules. But you came to my ranch. My ground. My terms. What the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I've been a Navy SEAL sniper for 23 years. That I've conducted operations in hostile territory where the enemy had all the advantages. That I've survived situations that would have killed you in the first 5 minutes. I paused. And I'm talking about the fact that you just brought 6 men onto my property, all armed, making threats. Which under Montana law, gives me every legal right to defend myself. Ralph's expression shifted. For the first time, I saw uncertainty. "Dwight," I said quietly into my radio. "They're all here." From behind the barn, Dwight stepped out. In his hands was a Remington 700, the same rifle we'd used during our deployments. He didn't point it at anyone, but the message was clear. From the roof of the house, another figure appeared. Andrea Kane, the doctor who'd treated Cameron. She held the phone. "I've been recording everything. Every threat, every admission. Already sent to my lawyer." And from the tree line, 3 more of my SEAL brothers emerged. I called them in 2 days ago, told them I might need support. Men I'd served with, who I'd trusted with my life. They'd come without question. The Schultz family's numerical advantage evaporated. Ralph looked around, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. "This is insane. You can't." "Can't what? Defend my property? Protect my son? Exercise my constitutional rights?" I stepped closer. "Let me tell you what's really going on here, Chief. For the past week, I've been systematically documenting your family's crimes. The FBI is investigating you. The IRS is auditing your finances. And attorneys are preparing a federal civil rights case that's going to destroy everything you've built. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your bank accounts. Notice any flags on your transactions? How about those sealed complaints about your brother? They're not sealed anymore. Federal subpoenas trump local corruption. Herman tried to draw his pistol, but Dwight's laser sight painted his chest before his hand cleared his holster. Don't. The situation froze. 6 armed men facing 5 former SEALs and a doctor with evidence. The math was clear. It wasn't in the Schultz's favor. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to get back in your vehicles and leave my property. You're going to stop harassing my son. And you're going to resign from your positions while you still can do so voluntarily. Because in about 72 hours, federal agents are going to arrest you both. The only question is whether you go quietly or make it worse." "This is bullshit," Herman spat. "He's got nothing. We own this county." "Did own," I corrected. "Past tense. Your reign is over." Ralph looked at his brother, at his deputies, at the tactical situation he'd stumbled into. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was realizing he'd underestimated me catastrophically. "This isn't over," he finally said. "No," I agreed. "It's not. But it will be. And when it is, you'll both be in federal prison. Where badges don't mean anything. Where your family name doesn't protect you. Where you'll learn what it's like to be the weak one that everyone preys on." Ralph's jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might be stupid enough to escalate. But then he stepped back, gestured to his men. "Let's go." They climbed back into their vehicles, engine starting. But as Ralph's SUV passed me, he rolled down the window. "You think you've won. You haven't. We've got lawyers, connections, resources. We'll bury you." "No," I said quietly. "You buried yourselves. I just made sure people could see the graves." As their vehicles disappeared down my driveway, Dwight came to stand beside me. That was risky. They could have started shooting. They could have. But men like Ralph Schultz are cowards at heart. They're only dangerous when they have overwhelming power. Take that away, and they fold. What if they come back with more men? More firepower? They won't, because now they know they're being watched. Any aggressive move, any attempt at retaliation, it just adds to the federal case. I looked at my old friend. "Thanks for coming." "Always." Cameron emerged from the house, pale but steady. "Is it over?" "Not yet," I said, "but we're winning, and that's what matters." The next 72 hours were tense but uneventful. The Schultz family made no further moves against us. Instead, I watched through various channels as their world collapsed. Saturday morning, the Billings Gazette ran a front-page story about corruption allegations in Clearwater County. Carrie Mahoney had leaked enough information to make it newsworthy without compromising the federal investigation. Sunday, 2 deputies from Ralph's department resigned, citing ethical concerns. Word was spreading that the FBI was coming, and rats were abandoning the ship. Monday, Herman Schultz didn't show up for work at the high school. Principal Dolan issued a terse statement that Coach Schultz was taking an indefinite leave of absence. The whispers started immediately. Everyone knew what that meant. Tuesday, federal agents arrived in Clearwater County. I watched from town as they entered the sheriff's department, served search warrants, began seizing records. Ralph Schultz was escorted out in handcuffs, not as a fallen officer, but as a suspect. The symbolism was powerful. Herman was arrested at home. The charges: assault, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. His wife Jane was arrested for her role in burying court documents. Even Roxanne, Ralph's wife, faced charges for money laundering through her real estate business. The Schultz family empire, built over 4 generations, collapsed in a single morning. I received a call from Carrie Mahoney that afternoon. "Vince, I don't know exactly what you did, but the FBI's case is even stronger than I anticipated. They found evidence of systematic corruption going back decades. This is going to be a landmark civil rights prosecution." "What about Cameron? Will he have to testify?" "Eventually, probably. But we've got enough other witnesses that his testimony won't make or break the case. And we'll protect him, make sure he's not traumatized further." "Thank you. I should be thanking you. Whatever pressure you applied, it worked. These people are going down." That evening, I sat with Cameron on the porch, watching the sun set over the Montana rangeland. He'd been quiet all day, processing everything that had happened. "Dad," he finally said, Did you do something illegal to make this happen?" I thought about how to answer. I used skills I learned in the military. I gathered information, applied pressure, and made sure the right people saw evidence of crimes. Everything I did was technically legal. But was it conventional? No. The other kids at school, they're saying you're dangerous, that you threaten the police chief, that you're some kind of vigilante. What do you think? Cameron was quiet for a long moment. "I think you stood up for me when no one else would. I think you faced down people everyone was afraid of. And I think I'm proud to be your son." My throat tightened. "You never had to earn that, Cameron. But I'm proud of you too. You survived something terrible and didn't let it break you. Because you showed me how. You showed me that evil people only win if good people are too afraid to fight back." That's exactly right. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to black. Stars emerged, cold and distant. Out here, away from light pollution, you could see the Milky Way stretching across the heavens. "What happens now?" Cameron asked. "Now you go back to school. Hold your head high. Show everyone that you're not a victim. You're a survivor. And eventually, you'll heal." "What about you?" "Me? I keep running this ranch. Keep rescuing horses. Keep being your dad." I paused. "But I also keep my skills sharp. Because the world has more men like Ralph and Herman Schultz. And sometimes, good people need someone willing to fight." "You really were a sniper for 23 years? "I was." "Did you ever, take a life?" "Yes, many times. It's something I'll carry forever. But every shot I took was to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's what made it bearable. Purpose." Cameron nodded slowly. "I think I understand." The trial took 6 months to put together. In that time, Cameron returned to school. The new principal, a no-nonsense woman named Georgia Duke brought in from another district, made it clear that the culture at Clearwater High was changing. The new wrestling coach, a former Olympic alternate, was professional, respectful, and focused on actual skill development. Cameron thrived. Without Herman Schultz's toxic influence, the team became a real team. By season's end, Cameron had won more matches than he'd lost. More importantly, he'd regained his confidence. Ralph and Herman Schultz both refused plea deals, thinking they could beat the charges. That was their final mistake. The trial was devastating for them. 13 women testified about Ralph's sexual harassment. 8 families detailed systematic abuse by Herman. Financial experts laid out the money trail. And FBI agents presented evidence of conspiracy that had operated for decades. I testified about what Herman did to Cameron, about Ralph's threats, about the culture of corruption that had allowed them to operate with impunity. When the prosecutor asked me why I'd gotten involved, I gave a simple answer. Because it was the right thing to do. And because no one else would. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Both Ralph and Herman Schultz were found guilty on all counts. Federal crimes meant federal prison. No local connections to protect them. No parole after a third of the sentence. Ralph got 20 years. Herman got 18, plus permanent placement on the sex offender registry. Roxanne and Jane received shorter sentences, but would never hold public positions again. Principal Dolan, who'd enabled the abuse, was also charged and convicted. He got 5 years. Clearwater County underwent a painful transformation. New leadership, new policies, new accountability. It would take years to fully root out the corruption, but the process had begun. For my part, I returned to my quiet life. The ranch, the horses, my son. But I remained vigilant, ready, because predators still existed. And sometimes, sheep needed wolves to protect them. A year after the trial, Cameron graduated high school with honors. He'd been offered scholarships to several colleges, but he chose Montana State to stay close to home. We celebrated at the ranch with Dwight and a few other SEAL brothers who'd become regular visitors. So what are you going to study? Dwight asked Cameron. Criminal justice, my son said. I want to be an FBI agent, work on civil rights cases. I felt a surge of pride. That's a noble goal. I'll learn from the best, Cameron said, looking at me. You showed me that sometimes the system needs people willing to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Just remember the difference between justice and vengeance. Oh, I know the difference. You taught me that too. He smiled. Vengeance is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is about protecting other people from being hurt the same way. Damn, Dwight said. Kid's smarter than both of us. That night, after everyone had left, Cameron and I sat on the porch like we'd done countless times before. The stars were brilliant, the air cool and clean. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. That day at the ranch, when the Schultz family came with guns, were you really ready to shoot them? I thought about lying about softening the truth, but Cameron deserved honesty. If they'd drawn their weapons, if they'd threatened you or anyone else on this property, yes, I would have stopped them by whatever means necessary. Doesn't that make you like them? Willing to use violence? No, because violence in defense of innocence is fundamentally different from violence in service of cruelty. The SEALs taught me that. We were capable of extreme violence, but only against those who threatened others. There's a moral distinction there, even if it's sometimes hard to see. And you're okay with that? The violence you've done? I make peace with it. Some days are harder than others. But when I think about the people I protected, the lives I saved, the evil I stopped, yes, I'm okay with the choices I made. Cameron nodded slowly. I hope I have that kind of strength someday. You already do. You survived what Herman did to you. You testified in court. You rebuilt yourself. That takes more courage than anything I ever did with a rifle. We sat in comfortable silence. Father and son, survivors of different wars. The Schultz family was gone, their corruption exposed, their victims vindicated. The system in Clearwater County was healing, slowly but surely. And my son was safe, whole, moving forward toward a future built on justice and principle. That was my victory, not the destruction of my enemies, but the protection of what mattered most. Some people might say I crossed lines, that I took the law into my own hands. Maybe they're right, but I'd spent 23 years learning that sometimes the difference between right and wrong wasn't written in law books. It was written in the eyes of victims who'd been failed by systems that were supposed to protect them. Herman Schultz beat my son unconscious. The principal laughed and said there was nothing I could do. The police chief threatened me and tried to use his power to make us disappear. They chose their path. They chose corruption over justice, power over principle, cruelty over compassion. I simply ensured they face consequences for those choices. Was it revenge? Maybe, but it was also protection, justice, and accountability. It was about making sure that evil didn't flourish because good people were too afraid to act. And in the end, sitting on my porch with my son beside me, knowing he was safe and the corrupt family that had preyed on this community was broken forever, I had no regrets. Because I'd done what Navy SEAL snipers always did. I'd taken a shot. Except this time, the weapon wasn't a rifle. It was information, leverage, and the absolute refusal to let evil win. The Schultz family wanted to know what I was going to do when they threatened my son. I showed them. And in showing them, I showed everyone else who'd been victimized that bullies could be stopped, that corruption could be exposed, that justice, real justice, was possible when someone was willing to fight for it. That was my service to Clearwater County. Not as a soldier, but as a father. And it was enough.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.